Yo! What is up, guys? We are back. How is everybody doing? Welcome to the stream. Hope you guys like the music. I think it's pretty damn good. I'll leave a link to that in the description when the archive goes up, if I remember to do so. But welcome to the first ever Forbidden Cast, I guess you could call it. We're gonna call it a Forbidden Cast. How's everybody doing? We got Michael, we got Supersonic Michael, we got both Michaels in the building. How y'all doing? So, people have mentioned the idea of having a podcast on the channel a long time ago, and I was sort of against it for the longest time because I have a tendency to get off topic. Which I'm gonna try my best not to in this episode. But, yeah, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the stream. We're here, we're live, and we're talking the next-gen consoles. And honestly, this next generation of consoles is probably the most interesting we've had in a long time. Because we know virtually nothing. We know everything about the Xbox, and pretty much nothing about everything else. Like, we have no clue what Nintendo is doing for next gen, if they're even going to do anything for next gen. We have no clue. It's all speculation. Some people think they might do like a Nintendo Switch Pro. For a while, I thought that was plausible, but now I'm not so sure. But we also have the PS5, which so far all we've gotten is a bunch of leaks of the dev kit, which is the photo you can see here, up at the right, as well as the logo and some info about the hardware, but we haven't actually seen the console or any gameplay of any kind. There's speculation of what price it's going to be at. A lot of sources are saying $400, which I think is probably right on the money. I'm thinking somewhere between $400 and $500 for both the Xbox and the PlayStation at launch. I feel like that is pretty reasonable. But that being said, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff we can speculate. And I believe that things aren't going well for the PS5. Now, why I say this is because we'll get to Nintendo in a minute. We'll get to them in a minute. But on the PlayStation side of things, I firmly believe things are not going well. And the reason why I say this is because they've shown nothing. Like, virtually nothing. And Microsoft is over here just dropping all kinds of information. Microsoft has already sent, like, pre-production consoles of their next console to a couple YouTubers that were able to fully take them apart and see everything down to, like, the processor, all the specs, everything. So, Microsoft is just out here handing out information like it's nothing. And Sony has shown us a logo, and they've talked about specs briefly, and that's it. We've seen gameplay on the new Xbox, we've seen load times, we've seen basically everything we could possibly want to know about the new Xbox. The information is there. So, I'm speculating, and this is purely speculation. Something has gone wrong with Sony's next console. Purely speculation, but I believe somewhere in the production process of this new console, something has gone wrong. Or perhaps they've looked at what the Xbox is doing, because that information is out there now, and they kind of took a step back and was like, yeah, we can't beat that. We need to rework some stuff, right? Either way, I feel like the Xbox has Sony with their tail between their legs. And before people try to claim that I'm being biased here, I'm a Nintendo guy. I love Nintendo, so I could give a fuck. I couldn't give a fuck between PS4 and Xbox, you know, it's whatever. But I firmly believe that something is not going right for the PS5. Maybe they're having some technical issues with it. There was some rumors that came out recently, supposedly from somebody behind the scenes, that was stating that the PlayStation 5 was having hardware difficulties, and that Sony is currently considering delaying it for up to an entire year, a 6-month to a year period. And although this is purely from a supposed insider, we don't have any confirmed credibility on this source. So take what I say with a grain of salt in that regard. It all lines up perfectly well, because think about it. If Sony is having issues with the next console, and Microsoft is over here just, running the entire show, the last thing they want to do is admit that they're having issues. So they're gonna withhold information. That's why we've only gotten a logo so far and some brief specs of the console. We haven't seen the console, we haven't seen it running, we haven't seen any of that. And if this leaker is correct, which based on the circumstantial evidence we've had so far, I'm willing to bet they are, the PS5 might get delayed. Now, this is all speculatory based on supposed insiders who we have no confirmation of their credibility. So do take that with a grain of salt. But I do believe that something has gone wrong with the PS5. Purely based on, one, based on what this leaker is saying, and two, based on how Sony is acting with this whole PS5 situation. It just doesn't make sense, the way that they're handling things right now, if everything was perfectly fine. The way that they're acting right now, as far as like revealing information and stuff, in my opinion, is very like damage control kind of situation, right? They're trying to not let people know that things are going wrong, but I believe something has gone wrong with the PS5. Let me know in the chat if you guys agree with me here. We got Michael, we got the Supersonic Michael Show, we got Lunch Special Geo, we got Ben Hagood in the chat. How y'all doing? But yeah, let me know in the chat if you agree that with me that you believe something has gone wrong with the PS5, because I think the fact that we don't even know what the console looks like yet, meanwhile Xbox has literally given us all the information up front, that's kind of suspicious. So I'm not sure how to feel about that. But we'll get back to that in a second. Let's talk about Nintendo a little bit. Do we think Nintendo is going to do a Nintendo Switch Pro, for example? A lot of people seem to think so. I, however, disagree. For a while, for a while, I was on board with the whole Nintendo Switch Pro, theory. But I disagree. I don't think Nintendo is going to release a new console this year. And quite frankly, I don't think they have to. I don't think they're gonna do it purely because they don't have to. The Switch is doing completely fine on its own. There is no reason for them to release a new console to undercut the Switch's livelihood right now, because the Switch is doing perfectly fine on its own. We have the Switch and we have the Switch Lite on the market, both of which are very successful and have continued to be very successful over long periods of time. So I don't believe Nintendo is going to make a new console this year. And I believe that's purely because they don't have to. They're doing perfectly fine on their own. And although you could argue that these consoles from Microsoft and Sony that are coming up will hurt the Switch's sales, and I bet they will, a little bit when they first launch. But I think the Nintendo Switch will do just fine. It's doing fine as it is now. And eventually Nintendo is gonna have to bring something new to the table. Because eventually they're just going to have to. But I don't think 2020 is the year that they do that. I think the Switch is doing perfectly fine on its own, without any need of them bringing a new console. Would I like to see a Switch Pro on the market? Absolutely. I would love to see it. Give us a better dock, because the dock that we have right now is very poorly designed. Give us, like, a Pro dock. Maybe make a dock for the current Nintendo Switch that has some sort of built-in upscaler that gives us a 4K resolution when docked. Do I think they're going to do that? No, that's not a Nintendo thing to do. But I would love to see it. I would love to see them do it. But I don't think Nintendo has any interest in getting into 4K. I don't think Nintendo has any interest in making a new console right now. I know that Nintendo is working on some controller concepts. We've heard reports from some insiders at Nintendo themselves, from confirmed sources, that Nintendo is looking to innovate on how we use controllers. What that means exactly, we don't quite know at the moment. The last time I can think of that Nintendo changed the way we use controllers would be when they came out with the Wii several years ago, where the Wii had motion controls. Not to say that the Wii was the first motion control console, but it was the first mainstream motion control console that was widely successful. It was what brought motion controls to the limelight. And that's the last time I can think of that Nintendo did anything with controllers that I would say would be revolutionary in changing how we use controllers. Because I guess you could argue the Joy-Cons or the Wii U pad, like the gamepad. But I mean, the Wii U gamepad was literally just a controller with a screen on it. I don't think that's changing enough to really be revolutionary like Nintendo's making out whatever controller concepts they're working on is going to be. Because they're acting like whatever it is they're working on with controllers is something that has never been done before. It's going to completely change the way we think of controllers, the way we use controllers. And honestly, we don't know if this controller concept that they're working on is something that will be for the Switch at all. It could be for a future console way down the line. Or it might be scrapped entirely and we never find out what it is and they never bring it to market. But the fact that Nintendo is, working on revolutionizing controllers, as they said, that makes me a little scared. And it makes me scared because the Nintendo Switch is widely successful, honestly historically successful, as it is right now. And whenever Nintendo wants to try to revolutionize something, it either goes really well, i.e. the Nintendo Switch is doing fantastic, and you could say that a Nintendo Switch definitely changed what we think of a video game experience because it's a handheld and a console, which, by the way, is not necessarily a new concept because there was the Sega Nomad. It's a bit of an obscure console, but you can look it up. There was a console called the Sega Nomad, which was both a handheld and a TV console, and that was several years ago, and it played Sega Genesis games. Granted, it wasn't nearly as streamlined a process as the Nintendo Switch is, nor is it, as successful or graphically powerful. But, even the Nintendo Switch on its own isn't necessarily a new concept. It's just a concept that Nintendo, kind of mainstreamed. So, the reason why them messing around with controllers is kind of scaring me is because the Nintendo Switch is doing fine on its own, and I don't want them to bring out some weird, wacky thing that undercuts the Nintendo Switch and just turns into a complete flop. And, controllers have gotten to a point where I would argue there isn't really much more you can change. We've kind of hit the plateau on controller innovation. I would think. So, what they're talking about with this whole controller thing they're working on, like I said, it might not even be for the Nintendo Switch. It might be for their next console, or it might be, a concept that never even goes to market. That tends to happen a lot. A lot of people don't realize that the Wii motion controller originally was going to be an accessory for the GameCube. We have beta hardware, beta Wii controllers for the GameCube. So, sometimes Nintendo just plays around with ideas and, they'll either send them to market, or if they don't, they'll hold on to them for a while and eventually reuse them for something else. So whatever this controller thing Nintendo is on about, we'll just have to wait and see if that ever becomes anything. But no, I don't think Nintendo needs a new console right now. I could honestly see them going another, the rest of this year, maybe even all of next year, and then release a new console. Because by then, I think it would be an appropriate time. So, towards the end of 2021 to, the mid-2022, I could see Nintendo dropping a new console, and I would think that would be the right time for it. Because right now, the Nintendo Switch is doing fine on its own. But I could be wrong. This is all speculatory, so I could be wrong. But as far as Xbox, I mean, we know all the details with Xbox as of right now. We know the hardware it's using. We know, you know, it's going to have backwards compatibility to a certain extent. You know, we know the PS5 is going to have backwards compatibility with PS4 to a certain extent. You know, we have a lot of ideas of what's going on with Microsoft because they've shown us everything. And I just really don't know how to feel about the PS5 right now. Because on paper, with the specs that we have, and I'll try to pull them up so I don't spread any false information here. So give me just a second. Because we should have specs sheets for both consoles. So let's see here. Okay, so for the Xbox Series X, the next gen Xbox console, the CPU is going to be a Zen 2 architecture from AMD. Which is going to be 8 cores clocked at 3.8 gigahertz. The GPU is a 12 teraflop with 52 CUs at 1, that's compute units. 52 compute units at 1.825 gigahertz. Which is a custom RDNA 2 GPU, which again is based on AMD architecture, which is capable of ray tracing from what we've seen, which is interesting because so far ray tracing, if I'm not mistaken, has been exclusive to NVIDIA, so it's interesting that they got it working on some AMD hardware. We'll have to see how that plays out. I guess we already have, because we've seen it running Minecraft with ray tracing in the demo they showed, so I guess we've already seen it. The die size is a 360.45, I believe that would be nanometers there. I might be wrong here. This information I have here is a little, it's a little poorly written, this article here. Let's see. The, memory is 16 gigabytes of GDDR6, with a memory bandwidth of 10 gigabytes at 560 gigabytes a second, and 6 gigabytes at 336 gigabytes a second. The internal storage is going to be a 1 terabyte custom NVMe SSD that Microsoft made in-house. Let's see. The expandable storage, it has a expandable storage system that will allow you to use either a 1 terabyte expansion card, which will give you the same performance as the internal SSD, or an external storage over USB 3.2 for like external hard drives and stuff like that. The optical drive is going to be a 4K UHD Blu-ray optical drive, which honestly I'm surprised it even has an optical drive at this point, because really we're getting to a point where optical drives just aren't needed anymore. And I'm sad to say that, because I love collecting physical copies of games. But like, all the game stores are going out of business, man. GameStop is on their way out. There's no way they're surviving this. So like, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, that's probably gonna be it for like physical games. eBay maybe. And eventually I could see Walmart and stores like that getting rid of them as well. So it's the end of an era, so it's interesting that it has an optical drive, but you know, whatever. And the performance target is going to be 4K at 60 frames per second, supporting up to 120 frames per second in certain situations. So on paper, that is a really good spec sheet there. Like, this thing is powerful. This Xbox is an absolute powerhouse. Now, how does that compare to what we know about the PS5? Well, we do know that the PS5 is using the same CPU and GPU architecture as the Xbox. However, it's implemented a bit differently, which is what I predicted a long time ago. I predicted that they would use the same architecture in both consoles, and it seems like I was right about that. But let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Alright, so pulling this up, we have the specs for the PS5. The PS5 is also using 8 Zen 2 cores, which is a AMD-based architecture. But this time, they're clocked at only 3.5 gigahertz, whereas Xbox was clocked in at 3.8. So that's interesting right off the bat. Secondly, the GPU has 10.28 teraflops with 36 compute units at 2.23 gigahertz, which, if we compare that to the Xbox had, let's see here, where's my spec sheet? The Xbox had 12 teraflops with 52 compute units. So, right there, we already have confirmation that both the CPU and the GPU for the PS5 is going to be less powerful than the Xbox Series X. So this is already not looking good for PlayStation. However, it gets worse. The RAM is 16 gigabytes of GDDR6, which is the exact same that we saw with the Xbox. However, with the Xbox, we actually know what the memory bandwidths are and how that memory is being allocated. Whereas with the PS5, we do not have specifications on that right now. So we don't know how they're allocating that 16 gigabytes of GDDR6. So that'll be interesting to find out later on. But moving on to internal storage, and this is where it really drops the ball here, because up till now, yes, it's less powerful than the Xbox, but it's still gonna give you damn good performance nonetheless. But this is where they really drop the ball, Sony, and I can't be more disappointed in this. The internal storage is 825 gigabytes. They couldn't even put 1 terabyte in this thing. They gave you 825 gigabytes of storage. That's it. Granted, it's an SSD, which I'm glad consoles are finally moving on to SSDs, because even though the consoles are acting like SSDs are a brand new thing, they've been around for a long time, guys. So, glad to see them in new consoles. But 825 gigabytes is just not acceptable in the market that we have. When we have entire games that are ranging from 50 gigabytes to, in some cases, I've seen 120 gigabytes for a single game. 825 gigabytes is just not enough. I would argue that 1 terabyte nowadays isn't even enough. And anybody who's, downloads games versus having physical ones probably agrees with me on that. Granted, we are talking SSDs here and not hard drives. And, SSDs generally are a little bit more expensive and, but I would have liked to have seen them do differently here. Microsoft has a 1 terabyte SSD in theirs. There's no reason Sony couldn't have put one in the PS5. Or at the very least, if they were going to undercut the SSD, throw in like a 500 gigabyte hard drive as well. Have both. That would have been fine. I would have been okay with that. And as far as expandable storage, you do have an SSD mounting system if you want to add additional M.2 SSDs. And then again, it has a 4K UHD Blu-ray drive. Again, same as the Xbox. I don't think anybody actually cares about the optical drives, but I just thought I'd mention it. So, on paper, the PS5 is worse than the Xbox in every category except for RAM and the optical drive, where they both have the same amount of RAM, which again, we don't know how they're allocating that RAM, whereas with the Xbox, we do know how they're allocating it, as well as the memory speeds and all that. So there's potential that they're worse in that category as well, but for right now, we'll call it even on RAM, based on the information I have in front of me. And then the optical drive, which is probably, in today's market, probably the most useless part of the console anyway. I see people using them as cup holders. No joke. I have seen people with previous consoles extend out the optical drive and use it as a cup holder. I mean, it's just, people don't use optical drives anymore. At least most of them. I do, because I'm old school. But a lot of people don't. So, if the only thing PS5 has going for it is that it has the same amount of RAM as the Xbox, and has probably the same optical drive as the Xbox, or at the very least, a similar one, that's not good. Because literally every other category in the spec sheet, the Xbox is better. Literally every category. And these are confirmed specs, guys. These are absolutely confirmed. So we have 100% confirmation, unless Sony goes and does some sort of pre-production revision of the console to buff it up a bit. This is 100% confirmed specs. So, we have confirmation that the Xbox is better in literally every category that actually matters. So, now comes the thing is, okay, the Xbox is more powerful. What do we get out of that as far as performance? Well, honestly, and this may sound strange, even though we know for a fact now that the Xbox is more powerful in practically every way possible, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a performance difference. And that may sound like a strange statement, but honestly, other than maybe load times, which we've seen the load times for the Xbox One, or, sorry, not Xbox One, Xbox Series X, you know, we've seen the load times, they're incredible. Other than maybe load times, I don't expect there to be any significantly noticeable difference in performance between the two consoles. And the reason why I say that is because both consoles are using the same architecture across the board. They're using the same CPU and GPU architecture. Granted, it's implemented in slightly different ways, but they're using the same GPU, CPU architecture. They're using the same amount of memory, probably at the same speeds, but we don't have confirmation of memory bandwidth for the PS5, so we'll have to wait on that. But ultimately, whether or not there's a performance difference that's noticeable in games between the two consoles, that's purely up to the developers, honestly. That's purely up to the developers. And given the fact that both consoles are using the same architecture for CPU and GPU, I would imagine porting games between the two consoles is going to be phenomenally easy, to the point that developers won't really have a need to, let's buff up the Xbox version a little bit just because we have that extra horsepower under the hood, so to speak. So, other than maybe load times, I don't expect to see any significantly noticeable performance difference between the two consoles. On paper, the Xbox Series X wins in literally every category except for maybe its name, because Xbox just gives their consoles weird names for some reason, but that's besides the point. I don't expect them to have horribly different performance outputs, because at the end of the day, that's purely up to the developers of the games to decide if they want to put in the extra effort to make the Xbox version just run a little bit better because it has that extra horsepower. Which I don't expect them to do that, because that would be abnormal for them to do that. Because that's just making more work for them when they could literally just make one game, port it to both consoles, and be done, because they both have the same architecture. So, we'll just have to wait and see if developers take advantage of that extra horsepower. I'm not expecting to see it, but we'll just have to wait and see. So, that being said, we're pretty much, for this little discussion, we have concluded that the Xbox is undeniably the most powerful console going into 2020, going into the next console generation. We have absolutely no clue if Nintendo is going to make another console at the end of this year for this generation. However, I personally do not believe they're going to, purely because I don't believe they need to right now. And we have speculated that the PS5 is having some issues in development, purely based on circumstantial evidence that we have at the moment, as well as a couple rumors. And overall, I purely believe Xbox has this console generation by the balls. I mean, they're just guns blazing. You know, every action that Microsoft has made leading up to this just shows that they're overly confident in what they're producing. And for good reason, because they are producing a great quality console here. Granted, we don't have confirmation on price. However, I'm expecting both consoles from Sony and Microsoft to be about $400 to $500. I don't expect either one of them to go over $500, and I don't expect either one of them to go under $400. So that is the range that I am predicting for price, although as of right now, we do not have confirmation on price. So basically, all you need to know is that Xbox, as of right now, going into this, is an absolute powerhouse. A force to be reckoned with. Which is great, because they really dropped the ball with the Xbox One, and I think they've learned from that, and that's why going into this, they're just going in swinging. They're giving it all they got, and I'm excited. I'm excited for this generation. So that being said, we're gonna wrap up here. Let me know what you guys think of these, of my talking points I've made here. And let me know if you guys like this whole, like, podcast rant kind of format. It's something very new on the channel, so I'm not sure if this is something that will make into a regular series or not. You know, you guys let me know what you think. But for now, we're gonna wrap up here. Thank all you guys for watching. Shoutouts to our member board. We got Shadow Black, Red, my kick-ass mama, Fun and Crazy Sunny, and Romarsh. If you want your name on the member board, gotta hit that join button. But for now, thank all you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, guys.